Alrighty, so for week 4 Learn Together, we will cover a project that I want you to come up with. I'll tell you the details in a minute that cover some of the fundamental things we've learned in these 3 days. And I have to say, every week that goes by, I continue to enjoy this content more and more. I hope you are as well. And based on your feedback, it seems you may be. Okay, so I want you to find an exercise or a project that you want to refactor. Okay, and then do the following refactor. Didn't say this here, but I specifically will. And I ended up coming up with something different, but sometimes the hardest part of coming up with something is actually coming up with a concept. So if you want to take something we've done so far and refactor for these requirements, you can do that. The one thing would say here is don't use the calculator project because it's pretty much you can use that as kind of a guide. I think that's probably a pretty good guide to help you. You don't have to use the recursion idea, but I think it's also fun to use that. So here's the general requirements, and then I'll show you how I accomplished this. Like first, allow the user to run the code until they want to stop. We've seen that. Once they stop, some type of reporting back based on their input. Use a list of data dictionary or something similar. Okay, so I at least want to see either a nested dictionary or I think probably more, and I think this is we see this a lot. This for this particular type, like here's the data that I'm going to store based on the feedback. Right, so it's going to be a list, and inside the list is going to be a dictionary. Each dictionary has an activity and a calories burned. So you can see based on my idea here, and here's the link to this, is I found out on the web calories by 30 minutes of activity based on your weight. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up pulling out, and I didn't do all of them because I just thought that'd be too much. So I pulled like 4 activities, and then I asked the user for the activity, and then I asked them for the number of minutes because I'm assuming some things, like I said, the weight, so I don't have to do the whole thing. Although I think that'd be a good challenge to do that. But in this case, if they chose, I think I chose basketball. As a matter of fact, I can see here as I actually chose, here's my calorie activity weight. Actually, it shouldn't be weight, it should just be calorie activity, calorie by activity. I should change that. And then I set up just a empty list so I could track, place new entries in there. So I chose basketball, housekeeping, weight training, and backpacking. And based on this, it's assumed it's a 30 minutes. So I have to convert whatever the input I get, however many minutes. So pretty standard stuff we've seen. I'm going to do while enter, set up a Boolean while it's true. I'll ask, right? Actually, first I'll run get user input. And so then it prints out, and we saw this in the calendar, but it prints out the activities. Okay. And then select an activity, how many minutes, right? Determines calorie burn, which is another function that I pass in minutes and activity. I calculate the calories. I divide it by 30 to get the time. And then I set up a new entry with the activity and the calories burned, and then I append that into the list, and then I return this here so that I can just output to the user. Okay, so I allow them to do, and matter of fact, let me just show you, and then I'll talk about the last part. Let me just do it clear real quick. So if I run it, one of the things I definitely would probably do if I worked on this more is make this easier to um, do housework. Let's say I did housework for 40 minutes, burned 68 calories. So I say yes. Let's say I did basketball for 30 minutes. Okay, so if I say no, I don't want to enter anything else, then it gives me a list of the items the activities, calories burned, and then a total calories burned. And the only thing I had to find outside of what we've already covered to do this was for the entries and tracking. Okay, so this is just outputting what those are as we're entering them. But in here, remember, this is a list of dictionaries. And So what I did is I had to find this dot items. So I said for entry and tracking, and then for K and V. So for the key and the value and the entry dot items, we'll pull out the key and the value that's listed in there. And then I just print it, and then I do an accumulator plus equals. And then after I'm done iterating over all the items in the list and picking out the key and the value, then I total them. Okay, and then I gave a reference, and and this is where doing this kind of work is good. You definitely want to give credit where credit is due. I had seen this items before, but I went and found an example that kind of helped me pull that together. Okay. So that's the kind of work I want you to do here. Um, let's see, did I go over all this? Use right or something similar, right? So I really prefer you use a list of the data dictionary. They should just say dictionary. um, you could also do a list of nested dictionaries. I think that's also a really good challenge. Make sure you select a different. Oh yeah. So here's the other thing: is I want you all to select something different, right? If you're going to use projects we've already done, then choose the project or exercise you want to work on here. And actually, I should have. I'm going to come back here, and I didn't reserve. I don't know why I didn't type that, but you can reserve your selection earlier, come up with something different. That's what I ended up doing. But here's the key: is also it needs to be different than your dev work. So if you want to like early reserve before you're ready to actually post, you can just hit reply and say, right, I'm going to work on like rock, scissors, paper. Right, that's one I suspect I know a couple of folks. Now that one would make sense. You could totally do that where you play and you keep track of the gameplay, and you might ask for the username and then do some kind of leaderboard. That'd be a fun one to do, right? So, again, reserve early. Everybody needs to do something different. You do want to use functions and return values. Don't use the calculator project, but you can base it on that, as I said before. So put this in week 3 in your public repo. Name the file main.py. If you're using a project, like I said, I didn't, but if you are, you can copy the starting code and then complete the steps above and then post the URL. And by the way, make sure when you post a link, right, you actually provide a link here. It just makes everyone else's replies a little easier because they can look at your code. And here's the key, really. I want you to, in your reply, is actually look at the person's code and read it, right? And then either ask questions about why they did something, or just make a comment that shows you actually looked at the code. So to get full points, what I would say here, besides me correcting the typos that I had, is I want to see in your replies that you actually looked at the code, because there's a part of this work that is definitely about learning how to read code. And it's like anything else. It's like the more you read, the better writer you are. So the more you can read somebody else's code, you can do that. And then, by the way, let me just complete this. If you want to say reserved, right? Is that right? I think that's wrong. Oh, revert. You get the idea, though. Put in here, right, that you're going to take that one. Okay, so I showed you my code, week 3 main.py. If you feel like you want to be actually using a flowchart to kind of help you organize your thoughts, do that as well. But that's what I want you to do, because learning how to handle in JavaScript, we call this a list of array of objects, right? But in Python, you call this a list of dictionary items, right? So, but it is a very common data structure that we see. So, the more practice you get with this, the better. All right. Have fun with it. Talk to you later.